Okay. So we're going to start with a few introductions. So I'm Alicia Walkman. I am the Vice Chair of Research for Pediatrics. I'm one of the co multi-PIs of the Birch, and I'll turn it over to Amelia.
My name is Amelia Benjamin. I'm an interim associate dean for faculty development, and you can see the other things that are listed there. And I'm multi-PI with Joyce and Alicia.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joyce Wong. I'm in the College of Engineering, and I'm MPI with Alicia and Amelia, and so glad to see so many people on the call.
Sorry. So I'm just going to start with a brief overview of the program, and then we're going to go through some of the frequently asked questions that we've received already, and then open it up for general discussion. So as you all know, the Birch is a K-12 program focused on women's health research. Our vision is to promote interdisciplinary women's health research to eliminate health inequities across the life course. And our mission is to develop investigators who contribute to the flourishing network of women's health equity and sex differences across the translational science continuum. And, we're going to do that through developing independent research, women's health researchers, improving career advancement and vitality, and also building upon team science and research design skills via our engagement with our new women's health research arc as well. So the components, so we are going to be selecting 3 scholars. We can have 3 scholars at any given time as part of the program. And this is across all of BU as well as Boston Medical Center to participate in a 2-year K-12 program focused on career development for women's health research. The program includes 75% protected time. This can be modified to 50% for those of you that identify as proceduralists. And the program is mentored in that you have to be list at least 2 senior mentors who will be part of your program to develop an individual development plan. The program also includes, we're going to have monthly seminars for the scholars, which includes, core curriculum centered around, again, career vitality, grant writing, translational science, and other women's health topics. And there will also be an annual symposium hosted here at BUBMC. The program also includes a national Birch symposium every year as well. Provided by the grant is salary support for $100,000 annually per year, in addition to fringe, as well as $50,000 annually to cover research costs and/or educational components. So briefly, the eligibility requirements, and again, we received many questions regarding this, which we'll go through, but starting with the first one is that this program really is focused on individuals who have a dedicated sort of career path to women's health research. Applicants have to have a primary active faculty appointment at BU, be a U.S. citizen or non-citizen national or permanent resident, have a clinical doctorate or PhD degree or equivalent, have completed any postdoctoral training expected for their appointment in the field, example, residency or fellowship, and be less than or equal to 8 years of research training beyond that last doctoral degree. And the last point is that you cannot have been a PI or program director on a center or program project, a previous or a K award or R level award, or be considered competitive for an R level award. And just before we go into the Q&A, just a brief overview of the deadline. Again, everything is on the website. So the website we've listed here, it's off of the BUCTSI website. The due date for applications is November 10th. And we are going to have a very quick turnaround where we expect to have decisions out by the week of November 26th. The materials, the letter of intent was due actually last week, but we are, still, accepting if you, didn't get the notification in time, that you're submitting an initial letter of intent via webcam, and then you'll receive a follow-up email that will allow you to upload the rest of your application, which includes the bio sketch, and other support for the candidate, a 3-page career development plan, which is again based on kind of the NIHK format, specific aims page, research strategy, which is up to 4 pages, as well as the bio sketches for your primary and secondary mentors. And we do talk a lot about this in our overview document, but the individuals who are listed as your primary and secondary mentors must have a strong external funding record. And ideally, we would recommend that you have mentors from 2 different disciplines to help to build on the program. The next component is that there does need to be a letter of support from the department chair confirming the 75% protected time. And the last piece being a budget and justification, in which we provided a template as well on the website. So just to review how we're going to be doing the selection. So each application will be reviewed by 2 senior researchers, primarily, actually, I think almost essentially all members of our internal advisory board and or senior mentors who have already, signed up to be part of the BIRCWH program will review the application. These are going to be individuals who have stated that they don't have a conflict of interest, so no one from your division or anything like that. We are going to be using the NIHK review criteria with the scale of 1 to 9, scoring on the criteria of impact, candidate, the career development plan, research plan, as well as mentorship team. And the top 50% of applications will be discussed in a meeting with all of the MPIs, as well as our internal advisory board members. Just to know, we have representation from like all of the participating schools at BU as part of our internal advisory board. We really want to have hopefully scholars to represent different schools and disciplines. So I am going to stop there and turn it over to Amelia, who's going to go over some of the questions that we've received so far. And then Joyce is going to open it up for other questions that people have.
So if you want to drill down after we display these FAQs on any given FAQ, question, then please raise your hand or put something in the chat. So one of the questions is, what are the mentors expected to do? And I think we need to begin with the end in mind. This program will not be successful if our scholars are not successful. And by success, it means they go on to receive either a further funding from federal sources, NIH, NSF, PCORI, blah, 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 either another K or a R-level grant. And so if we begin with that and we understand this is a very big deal for our institution, we've got to be successful so that we can continue this program after the 5 years of this program. Why am I saying that? Because for anybody who supported a scholar on a K, it is very difficult to get a K. It is very difficult to get an R, and it will be even more so. And we know that the scholars that are best supported by their mentors are most likely to be successful. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean that they have to fund your research program. That is not the expectation. The expectation is that they will meet with you twice monthly at a minimum, help you think about deeply your career development plan, your individual development plan, attend biannual meetings with the mentorship team and the BU BIRCWH leadership. They will partner with you on creating your goals and, be committed to, reading your subsequent grants. When you approach listed senior mentors who have interdisciplinary expert, how do you best approach them? All senior mentors listed have pre-agreed to be contacted by potential scholars to serve in this mentorship role. You don't have to pick a senior scholar, but these are people that are, shovel ready to kind of walk in and be supportive. Any questions? If you do, please raise your hand. Okay. So if your faculty appointment begins after the application is date, but before the appointment date, are you eligible? We are only going to review candidates who are current BU faculty at the time of application. It just, it's too complicated when you first land in an institution. Typically, it takes a year to figure out where the bathrooms are. Dr. Sherrick.
I was just curious, does your mentor have to have an appointment with BU, or outside mentors allowed?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think we're going to talk about that on a subsequent slide, but just in time. The answer is that it doesn't have to be, but we strongly encourage you to have 2 mentors from BU. It doesn't mean, make new friends, but keep the old. So for many people, they have deep relationships with people that are deeply invested outside the institution. We want to encourage those to continue to grow and flourish. At the same time, all of politics is local, that's what, Tip O'Neill said, decades ago. And your ability to successfully garner the resources of our institution are going to be advantaged by having people who understand the institution and how to advance in it. Did that answer your question? So I would say yes, and bring that person in, but find 2 mentors here. Now, just
That's
say
perfect.
you don't find 2 mentors here, we won't disqualify it, but we're looking for people who, have assembled a mentoring team who's going to help them be competitive in their career trajectory and attaining additional funding. You do not have to have done a postdoc or have, an additional degree like an MPH or something like that. Part of the 50K can be used to, fill in potential training gaps. Next slide. We are agnostic and do not discriminate based on whether people have modified degrees, modified faculty titles, whether they're research or clinical. All assistant professors are eligible. Postdoc, associates, and fellows are not eligible. People must have a faculty appointment at the time that they apply. This is a really complicated, we've thought a lot about that, in the days when the average R01 person is 45, people have a long pathway of training. So if you get an MD and then you become a cardiothoracic surgeon and you also do 2 years of research, you're going to be more than 8 years past your MD, which may be your terminal degree. So what we want to think about is people who have the 8-year clock starts at the completion of your training. If that is clinical training or postdoc training, we're going to start the clock then. We have asked our colleagues at NIH, and then there's this funny thing called the shutdown, and they said that they couldn't talk to us until after the shutdown. And so this is what we've gotten from other BIRCWH sites. Presumably at some point the shutdown will end. We don't know when. And then we will verify all of our assumptions. But our best understanding from our BIRCWH colleagues around town is that the 8-year clock starts after the completion of training. And then we think that the 8 years are counted to the month. In terms of the terminal degree or after residency fellowship, again, we're going to take it after clinical training or fellowship. It just, otherwise, I don't think any clinician, the vast majority of clinicians could not do this if they've done any kind of fellowship. It just would not be practical. Next slide. This is really important. It would be profoundly ironic if we discriminated against people who took medical or caregiving leave. And the issue is, though, that we don't get to decide how long the clock gets paused. The clock gets paused per NIH policies, and you need to request an ESI extension in ERA comments because that's the way it will be factored. That's not something that we can, that's not a decision that we can make. And if you have any questions about that, we're happy to discuss them afterwards, but hopefully your mentors are talking to you about if you've had a time away for your own health issues, for family issues, for parental leave, etc. Please make sure you request an ESI extension. What happens if you have medical or family leave during the 2-year award period to your eligibility and timing? We anticipate that the family medical leave will be added to the 2 years and that carry forward will be awarded. And the extension is going to be equivalent to the time away in most cases. Having said that, as we all know, we are in unprecedented times. We don't know that carry forward will be allowed. So that makes all leave complex. We are committed to trying to make it work. We're vague about how that's going to work if NIH does not honor carry forward. That sounded really squishy, and I don't know how better to answer it. Yeah. What if the chair's letter of support does not cover the salary cap, reducing the protected time? To be eligible and competitive, the chair's letter of support must indicate that you will have the required protected time to comply with NIH rules. That will be 75% unless you are a proceduralist. If you are a proceduralist, presumably doing procedures, then you can work with the NIH and you can do 50%. So that typically, it wouldn't be somebody who does a central line. It would be somebody who needs to be in the electrophysiology lab or the OR to keep up their clinical skills. And so I'm hoping that people understand what we mean by that. You can be for instance, I'm a cardiologist who's, wouldn't do a procedure, would probably kill somebody if I did. I would not be eligible for the 50% protected time. It would have to be the 75%. We're still looking for clarification from our NHPO. We think that they will grant it for people who really are doing very skill dependent procedures. Do people have questions about that? Okay, next slide. This is a complex one. What about people who are already applying for NIH CDA while applying to the BIRCWH? May one also submit a CDA to NIH. If you receive an external K award, it's very clear. You have to relinquish your K-12 if you want to take the external K award. The K-12 scope must fit into 2 years of funding. So don't repurpose your NIH 5-year career development award and just submit it to the BIRCWH. That will not be competitive because you will have an unrealistic scope of work. If you have a NOAA for a K or an R, we urge you not to apply. Just don't apply. If you receive an NIHK, the number of and then if you do get an NIHK, say you apply, and then 1 year after you have the BIRCWH, you end up getting an NIHK. The number of years that you can use on the NIHK is very institute specific. And I literally went down a rabbit hole. I could not find a uniform policy across NIH institutes. You need to look at your specific institute to figure out what your specific institute allows. Do people have questions about that? Let's back up. This for me is one of the more complicated slides. Any questions? There is a rule where 2 NIH grants really should not, with the same, purpose, shouldn't be evaluated at the same time. We have a very compressed timeline. So if you have an NIH that is at study section, it's pretty complicated. Technically, we should not be reviewing it. Hopefully, you're not in that situation. Next slide. Can you apply if you haven't had a specific women's health focus on your research? So, complicated answer. People are going to be more competitive if they can convince the review committee that they have a longitudinal commitment to women's health research. We know that the past is the best predictor of the future. Having said that, I personally have never had a card, I'm not a card-carrying women's health researcher. Every single one of my papers has discussed sex differences. And I have a lifelong commitment to investigating sex as a biologic variable in the context of EPI. So what we're looking for are people who want to advance women's health research and research informing clinical care. Basic scientists, we want that, but you have to make you have to make the crosswalk with why it's important to women's health research. People have questions about this? Okay. Next slide. Covering the salary gap. This is very complicated. Candidates have to dedicate 75% or 50% of their procedural towards research. They can get funding from non-federal grants that can be applied to covering the gap. You can't get it from an R01, as a COI, as an R01. Questions about that? Next slide. Citizenship. You can go to the FOA, the original application. It's basically like NIHK, with the possible exception of a kangaroo K99 R00. You have to be a citizen or a non-citizen national of the US, or have been lawfully admitted for permanent residence at the time that you get the grant. Next slide. This was tricky, and we don't have a great answer, honestly, for the SBIR R44. Just a sec. We think that it doesn't, an SBIR grant doesn't count. We do know R01 equivalent codes. We found them on the NIH website. So they would disqualify you, but an R03 and an R21 does not disqualify one. When the shutdown ends, we will clarify the R44. We think that it doesn't disqualify you, but we can't swear about that because we need to talk to an NIHPO. I couldn't find anything on it. In terms of what happens if you've already applied for an R01, but it wasn't discussed, does that make you too competitive? We're going to evaluate each application. If somebody really looks like somebody, the purpose of this isn't to fill in people who don't get R01s. It's to get people who have a robust training outlined that the K is really going to help them be competitive for an R01. But if you had an R01, it wasn't discussed, and particularly if they had questions about whether you were ready for the R01 and your background, your publication record, etc., we think that this mechanism would make sense. It's sort of it's going to be evaluated as a study section. I would urge you you have to make the case, why should you be funded if you have, yeah. Next slide. This is our contact. And next slide. I think that may be it. Okay, now's the time when people can come on camera and ask their questions. And you can also put them in the chat. If you do want AI to be turned off, please you put it in the chat. Okay, so do you want to lead this, Joyce?
Sure. We can open it up for other questions on
There are questions in the chat while we're waiting, Joyce.
Oh, yes. Okay, I have one here. Kira, do you want to ask your question, or I could read it, or if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, my camera is misbehaving here. So is it correct to read your sentence as saying starts after completion of postdoc training, as in the word postdoc wasn't there, but is that how I understood? Thank you.
Yeah, so just to clarify for that, that was something we heard from somebody who was running a current BIRCWH right now, that person said they didn't have any problem using the date from after postdoc. Yeah. Okay, Raphael. And then Samantha.
You mentioned that you guys have the institutional award for 5 years. I'm mostly just asking because I just started at BU literally 2 months ago. Is this going to have another award cycle next year as well, and the opportunity to apply then, or is this just a one-time deal?
Well, for the appointment is actually for like a minimum 2 years. So we're anticipating that it would be in the off year. I don't know if Amelia, you want to take that.
Yeah, so if people apply for this and then they get a K in 1 year and they drop it, then we will have another cycle because we have to keep these filled. Having said, and we know that in 2 years we will be offering this again, but we don't know exactly when. The timing will depend upon, a lot of factors, but we do anticipate in 2 years. I wouldn't count on it being available in the next year or two. I think 2 years is a pretty solid.
And I believe there's maybe a rule in the 5th year, we probably are not able to onboard, if I'm not mistaken, the 5th year, and then we would be putting in a renewal. Go ahead, Samantha.
That was actually my first question. So thank you for asking that, Raphael. My second question is, I just wanted to get some clarification. It sounds like the BIRCWH most likely will not fund global work given the current funding environment. So just wanted to confirm whether that's true. And then if so, can scholars who are chosen be splitting time internationally during funded time, understanding that the BIRCWH won't directly fund global work? But for example, if I have already existing global health commitments, can I be remotely doing work that's Boston-based? If that makes sense.
That's okay. So I can speak for the international. I know that they either just came out with more clarity, NIH broadly, on work with international partners. But I because I serve on council for another institute for NIBIB, but that's a part, I guess, I don't know if Amelia or Alicia, you have clarity on, but I just know there's a lot of, confusion and uncertainty about international and NIH right now.
And then if instead the focus is a Boston-based project, can someone still be in some of that protected 50% time or 75% time, but still be like complying with the BIRCWH requirements?
I believe so, but that's something we probably would have to double check with the program officer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Alicia, you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I think just the main point is that whatever project is proposed, unfortunately, we'll need to comply with whatever the current NIH recommendations are, which I think, in a way will limit some of the projects we can fund. But, in terms of like where you're spending your time and things like that, I think there's probably some flexibility, but the actual project has to be within the scope of what's currently allowable. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jane.
I have a similar question about thinking about the current environment and NIH guidance in terms of even our definitions around gender, womanhood. Are we advised that in what we are submitting for this internal part of the process should reflect those current guidelines? Because it can get tricky.
I would say yes. You don't want to use the term gender. Sex as a biological variable is perfectly fine. But if you look actually at the Office of Research of Women's Health, which ORWH, which is partly funding this as well as NIAMS and IAMS, we actually had to remove gender from all of our abstract and everything. So
Thank you.
and Amelia, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so this is a really important question, and I personally had to purge a lot of my BioSketch. And at this point, let's take the AI companion off, please.
Also,
Thank you. Okay. So I actually, we had a speaker for Department of Medicine, an invited speaker, and no female speaker. Anyhow, I asked this question, kind of what they were doing, and what they recommended is, for instance, if you have a grant, you can put in sort of the top on your CV or your BioSketch. Think about if some relational agent or machine learning AI algorithm was going through your grant. We need to adhere to NIH guidelines and executive orders. We will not do a service either to our faculty or the future funding of our grant if we don't comply with those. So what the person recommended, or what they are doing, is they're putting in the, for instance, the authors, the journal, the PubMed ID. They're not putting words, the titles in that potentially are challenging. Or for instance, the grant, they're not putting in the name of the grant that doesn't subscribe to NIH policies. They will put the grant number in.
Thank you.
Any K that we fund, my understanding has to be and eventually cleared by NIH. And so I think it's really worthwhile us all thinking deeply about how do we frame our science around things that we all agree on, everybody in the country. For instance, I think everybody agrees that all populations should receive high quality healthcare, right? I think there's a way to say a lot of what we want to say that hopefully will not be viewed as polarizing or divisive.
So the term I've heard is all Americans deserve healthcare. That's the phrase that's been used. And then also instead of health equity, we decided to use the word health quality. I've heard other people say health access. But the words actually do matter.
Yeah, and then the speaker today talked about, I wanted to look up her exact words, populations at highest risk for poor outcomes. Right? I think that's really getting at the essence of what we all are trying to do, particularly at a mission-driven institution. Other questions? Some questions have come up and we've been emailed. What happens if I do, more social science type research? What happens if I do more mechanistic basic science type research? What happens if I do whatever? We are agnostic to the type of research. We're very interested in T0 all the way to T4. So the most basic of basic to population-based research, we believe in having heterogeneity in research disciplines, convergence, whatever you want to call it. And at the same time, whether one is a fundamental basic scientist or a population scientist, we need to connect it back to how it will advance women's health in the population and, clinically. Samantha, if you email me, I will email you a document that's been given to me to provide some guidance about language that really helps frame what we care about. Anybody who wants to, I'll put my email in the inbox and I'll be happy to email it to you. In the chat, I mean.